just in a fucking white t-shirt, but all right.
Who cares?
Yeah, I guess.
Let's see. Is it all right? So Lou, you just had an interesting conversation with a woman. What was going on?
Yeah, so I was talking with a retiree a few minutes ago, and she was telling me about the experience she had at her old house with solar and her solar salesman who she felt was not telling her the full truth when she got her system installed. She was getting double billed. She believed that she would not get any bill for solar, that it would be totally free, right? That's a big word that people like to throw around in this business. I think that the second you look further than paper deep, it's just not necessarily the case. So, um, yeah, interesting though. Some of the terminology, and even when you don't use free, some of those, oh, you're not going to have any cost ever, or you're never going to have anything. It's I don't know, it can be interesting, but yeah, I wanted to bring that up and see what else you thought about that kind of stuff and some of the language that we use
The
or
no
others
cost
use.
out of pocket, but a lot of folks saying no cost when it always hurts to hear those types of stories. And we a lot of times are having to overcome on our conversations those misconceptions. Uh, Now, what makes it so advantageous is the function of the system is going to reduce your grid usage. And in most cases, when you use less from the grid, you're being billed less by the grid. A lot of our clients in the most advantageous utilities get, really minimal base connection fees. And there are some retail electric plans that you can wash some of that stuff out still with the proper design system. And so, yeah, you're going to potentially reduce and eliminate your grid power bill. But ultimately, somebody's paying for the solar or the batteries or all of the above. And there's a lot of advantages to that where instead of renting it from the grid, you own the system. Most of the time, folks are getting a fixed cost that never goes up, never increases. There's other plans that have escalators and things like that where it gets more expensive every year. But ultimately, you're reducing and eliminating one bill and trading it for a different bill with the advantage of protecting the inflationary effects. The bill never goes up, never increases again. You're getting some backup power protection. And so what's the monetary value of all the food in your fridge and your freezer, right? What's the monetary value of the peace of mind and security of never losing power, of being able to keep communications devices on during outages, being able to monitor that in your home security systems during outages if you're not there and the rest of your family is at home, all of those types of things. And for the most part, it depends on, right, if you're a really diligent shopper, if you shop for electricity really well and you get yourself a super cheap rate, or if you're in a co-op where you've got rate protection because it's you and 10,000 of your neighbors all buying electricity together in a co-op, then yeah, you've already got a really good price. So you might pay a little bit of a premium above that initially for a full package system. But regardless of what your rate is today, what's it going to be tomorrow? Do you have any control over what the utility companies are going to bill you tomorrow?
No, we've got no control, and that's you know one of the massive benefits, like you're talking about, to solar is just putting that control, getting that as we talk about expansion pack to the American dream, and just making sure that your family are taken care of, no matter what's happening in the outside world. Today I'm sitting outside of McDonald's. Why? because somebody thinks there's copper in fiber optic cables. And so I don't have any Wi Fi, right? And so whenever somebody thinks that there's copper in the electrical lines, which there might be, I'm not an electrical line expert, but you're going to run out of power. Or if a tornado runs through and has no care what's there, you're going to run out of power. And so if your house is there, you need power, you need that stability, and you need that insulation as well from the rising costs. Even if you're in a co-op, right, where you are getting a really good rate, it's still increasing year after year, sometimes even month after month. That rate is increasing. I think over the last 4 years here in Texas, we've seen a 10% increase in electricity rates. And so when we can insulate ourselves from that, you're compounding your savings over time. It's literally compounding. What could you do saving 10% every single year compounded on top of itself? Like it's impressive. And the power that you get and the freedom that you get really is powerful, I think, for the families that we work with.
I agree 100%. But yeah, you gotta be careful who you choose to work with, right? Solar batteries, these systems are a tool. You can use a tool in the right way, you could use a tool in the wrong way. And when when a company or a representative is throwing around terms like free, not going to cost you anything, it should definitely raise alarm bells in your mind. And ultimately, it's about right working with who is going to take care of you right now with the candor of how the things actually work, and who do you believe will be there down the road to continue to offer you similar services.
Oh, 100%, right? And I think that falls a little bit back onto it's not what you know, it's who you know. You could know everything under the sun about solar, but if you don't have the physical capabilities to work on it yourself and you're working with people who don't really want to take care of you, if something goes wrong, you're in a bad place. You're not in a good place. And this lady, honestly, she said, she was saying, oh, he was a great salesman. He got me. And whether it was the right thing to say or not, and to be honest, I don't know his process. I don't know who he was or who he was talking about. But this is what I said to her, was just that, it sounds more like he was a good liar. It sounds like he was somebody who was good at putting words together to make you think you were doing the right thing. When in reality, he was taking advantage of you. Right. And so, you never know the whole situation, but it's just, I hate hearing about cases like that when it's an elderly person involved who, maybe doesn't have very much support on the back end to look at things. I know anytime that we're talking with folks, we are are working hard a lot of times to try and get as many people on the phone for this one house as possible, right? Do you have kids that help you? Do you have, a husband, a spouse, a boyfriend, a friend, a neighbor who will come and listen in with you, right? And that's, less so even about, they could be renters, whatever, right? It's not about getting more business. It's about making sure you understand what's happening, that people around you understand what's happening, and that you're being taken care of. And it's just the right way to do business.
I agree with you. I'm with you on that. There was something I was thinking about in the middle of that, and it left me there. Let's see, what was it? Oh yeah, sales gets a bad rap typically, right? You know, a lot of times when you think of sales, the first place your mind goes is like even me. The first place my mind goes is there was a event that I went to. It was a concert or a comedian that we were seeing here in Irving. And it was at a venue. And right when you walk in the venue, indoor venue, there was a spin the wheel type situation. And, you know, you had the opportunity to whatever win a trip to Hawaii type of thing. Um, and so
Mm,
very much false advertising, win a trip to Hawaii with a whole heck of a lot of caveats. And so then you all of a sudden go get to talk to, you know, this sales guy who's all right, well, you got to come into our office. You got to sit down for this meeting, whatever, whatever. Oh, and you're going to pay a deposit right now today, $50, $100 to even have the meeting, which I was like, okay, no, like I'm not gonna. How did this go from you just want a free trip to Hawaii to pay me $50 to come have a meeting with me about I'm sure a timeshare that you got to sit through, whatever, whatever, whatever. But um,
for sure.
anyways, definitely there's a lot of slimy. By the same token, there's also sales happening at extremely high levels, hyper luxury goods and services, a yacht, right? If you're Jeff Bezos and you bought a $500 million yacht, there's a salesperson involved in that process. Do you think that same,
For sure.
timeshare salesperson is that the same salesperson that's selling a $500 million yacht to Jeff Bezos? No, you know, and so that's really where we position ourselves is, we're in a it's an oxymoron, but it's a luxury necessity. In fact, I just got another email from a gentleman I was going to tell you about earlier, Lou, who we've met with a few times before. He happens to run an oil and gas company, lives out in Midland, Odessa. Beautiful property from the satellite image view. Um, we first met a couple months ago and really hit it off. It's typically just been he and I. His wife has not wanted to be involved in the conversations. They're very much along the Dave Ramsey path of their financial strategy. Seems like everything's
Love it.
paid off. And so the reason he emailed me just recently is because this huge federal incentive, 30% for homeowners, ends at the end of this year. But he had a really amazing sentence that I wish I'd gotten recorded and I missed it barely. But his thought is if you're not producing your own electricity here in the near future, you might not have any. So if you're not producing your own power, you might not have any. And so the reason for that is the Electricity Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, knows and is publishing that the demand in Texas is going to double in the next 5 years. So from today, July of 2025 to 2030, as a state, we're going to use double the amount of electricity that we do today. Demand from data centers, from electric vehicles, from greater population, more homes, more businesses. The electrification of homes, more communities being all electric versus having natural gas coming into them. The electricity demand is booming and the supply is not really keeping up. And now they're making it even more restrictive. The federal government is, right? They're eliminating these incentives. Many of these large scale, utility scale, solar, wind, hydroelectric projects are being canceled because of that. And so we're actually regressing in that regard. The demand is booming and supply is stagnant, increasing a little bit, for sure not increasing at the same rate that the demand is increasing. So, what we want people to envision and visualize when we talk about that stuff, first of all, everybody pretty much knows supply demand. When demand is really high and supply is low, what happens to the price? Goes up. So your price is going up. But think of other things And I met with a group of real estate agents just this week talking about this exact same thing. And one agent uplifted the word and took it right out of my brain and said it for himself. When demand is high and supply is low, what is the word for that? There's a gap. Lou, do you know the word?
I'm not going to have the time to think of it and make this fun. So no, I'll say no.
Scarcity. Okay.
Ah, so easy.
Scarcity is the
Okay.
word. So remember this. What happens anytime there's a panic? People go and they buy toilet paper off the shelves. And then what's the case? Then
No more TP.
there's no more TP. Okay. Eggs. There was a huge, bird flu or whatever the heck here in the last few months. And egg prices went through the roof because they had to, slaughter a billion chickens or whatever it was. And so now we weren't producing as many eggs. And so, demand for that. But the scarcity. So, scarcity as it relates to electricity. If demand is physically greater than supply, and if there's no toilet paper on the shelf, what does that mean for electricity?
Man, you better live next to a hospital or something because they're going to be cutting down the power everywhere. I mean, we saw it during Snowmageddon, right? If you were not connected to a fire station, police station, or hospital grid, and I mean in the same square block, you maybe they were turning your power. You, if you were lucky, you were getting power for about 30, 45 minutes every 2 hours. I mean, they turn it off. They can't supply it. There's none to go around.
And so, really, as I understand it, what the grid did there is they purposefully shut down the grid in self-preservation mode because I don't know all the intricacies of it, but if they allowed power to stay on and there just isn't physically enough demand, I believe that has far larger infrastructure implications of damaging infrastructure permanently and causing even greater damage. And so they are purposefully switching off entire, you know, parts of the state in that instance. And so the other thing that
Mm-hmm.
I think of is all of these hospitals or data centers, things like that, they have emergency backup generators. And during high demand events, data center companies that are good stewards of the community, they communicate and play ball with ERCOT. And there are times when the grid says, "Hey, data center company, we need you to island yourself. Turn
Hmm.
on your please." And so then the
Hmm.
the these large high demand locations power themselves, energize themselves, alleviating some of that demand from the grid to ensure that the rest of the neighborhood stays on and running. Um, and they realize incentives when they do that. The grid pays these data centers to do that. And
Shocker.
it's a lot, right? Because we're talking about, the some of these data centers are gigantic. They're all gigantic. We're talking 300 megawatt data center. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So what that means is, first of all, you've got watts, you've got kilowatts, which is 1,000 watts, you've got megawatts, which is 1,000 kilowatts. Okay, that is how much electricity you're using at a moment in time. I'm pulling 300 megawatts of electricity from the grid right now, this moment in time. If you pull that consistently for an hour, then you'll have used 300 megawatt hours of electricity. Okay. My home over a full year My house. I'm in the Colony. It's 2,000 square feet, 1983 build, new AC unit, all electric home, new water heater, new insulation, relatively new roof, new windows and doors. So it's about as efficient as it can be for a 1983 build. We use 18 megawatt hours of electricity a year. A data center that's 300 megawatt data center uses 300 megawatt hours of electricity an hour. Let me backtrack.
Whoa.
My house uses 18 megawatt hours or 18,000 kilowatt hours a year. A data center, again, varies in size, but there's many here in Dallas Fort Worth, one of which is at least a 300 megawatt. They're building a project, I think it's Stargate out in Abilene. It's going to be a gigawatt or a multi-gigawatt data center. They're building a nuclear power plant, which will power, I forget what it is, but it's like 10 to 20% of that data center. That's it. An entire nuclear power plant that will only power a small portion of its total electricity usage. But data center
Whoa.
today, one of many in Dallas Fort Worth, 300 megawatt hours an hour or 300,000 kilowatt hours an hour. My home uses 18,000 kilowatt hours a year. So, and
Wow.
it's just a bunch of computers. So it's running perpetually. It almost is always using that amount of electricity. So
Wow.
let's go 300 times 1,000, 300,000 kilowatt hours per hour times 24 hours in a day. 7,200,000 kilowatt hours a day times 365 days in a year. Got to turn my phone sideways to get this number for you.
Yeah, it's going to give you a little E in there somewhere.
So per year, they're using 2,628,000, or sorry, 2,628,000,000 kilowatt hours a year. Let's divide that by my home. Let's say that my home's the average home in Dallas Fort Worth, which pretty much seems relatively accurate based off of my experience, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
one pretty large data center is using the same amount of power as 146,000 homes. And they're
Wow.
popping up data centers left and right all over the place. So demand is going buku nuts. It's going crazy. The prices are going up. And these systems provide an opportunity for you to freeze your price. That way you don't incur any rate increases down the road and gain protection from power outages. When demand exceeds supply in electricity, power outage.
Mm.
That's why in the Frisco, Plano, McKinney area this year, there were, I think it was like 40,000 homes that lost power for 6 hours back in April or May. And then it happened again like a week or two later, right after that. And there was it wasn't because of bad weather. It wasn't so small and isolated because a drunk driver hit a pole in your neighborhood. It was 40,000 homes, 30,000 homes, some huge swath of North Texas, North Dallas that resulted in multi-citywide outages. Extreme weather compounds that, makes
Certainly.
a volatile situation worse. So there's a huge federal incentive right now, 30% For homeowners, it goes away at the end of this year. For businesses, it seems like it's going to get to live until like 2027. For so third party owned systems, power purchase agreements, things like that, got a little bit of breath left.
Hmm.
The battery incentive lives on until like 2030 something something for
Which
home
one?
for batteries.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but again, at this large utility scale, huge wind farms, huge solar farms, huge hydroelectric plants, anything that could be considered a renewable energy resource, because those projects take a very long time to develop, from engineering impact studies, permitting within cities, counties, et cetera, utility permissions. These projects that were already in the works in planning stages where they wouldn't be complete until 2028, they're now getting canceled because a
Hmm.
portion of that was going to get help from a huge federal incentive, right? I just read an article that Jagar Shah posted yesterday regarding a transmission line project that's getting canceled because of this. There is a $5 billion coming from the federal government. I think it was in the form of a loan from the Department of Energy to create transmission lines from wind farms in Kansas to population centers in Illinois and Indiana, so Chicago, um, and and I would imagine Indianapolis, and so that's not even about power production. It's about transmitting the electricity from where it's being produced, delivering it to where it's needed most, and regardless of your politics, if Chicago loses electricity because demand exceeds supply, and there's supply a few hundred miles away that you could have transmitted there, but now you can't because these high voltage transmission lines never got installed. Do you think the people of any major city are they really going to care about their alliances and allegiances and what color flag you're flying? Like, probably not.
Things degrade quickly when power is out for extended periods of time. It's impressive how fast things can turn into chaos. Um, yeah, no, it's scary to think about, and that's why people need to protect themselves and work with the right people.
Spot on. Yeah, so right now we're experiencing a little bit of a bull rush. A lot of people are aware that this incentive goes away. It's end of July right now. It seems like we got a lot of time till the end of the year. That's just not how it works. And of course, when you know a company like ours has uh, more work to process, we've got a limitation on the amount of projects we can physically install. You know, compound that against how many other companies like mine are all filing submissions in your cities. So the city's permitting loads are now higher, which is going to extend the permitting timelines. The utility companies, even higher concentration, right? Because Encore, as an example, operates in Dallas, they operate in Fort Worth, they operate in Frisco, they operate in Plano, they operate in everywhere, right? So Encore's
Everywhere.
application process heavily inundated right now and across all the other utility companies. So
Hmm.
do not wait. If you wait another month, that might push your project out beyond 2025. And then you're not able to capture that incentive. So
And for knowledge, what is it that at what point can you lock in your incentive, right? Because I imagine if everything except for one cord is installed on my system by January 1st, I'm probably getting my incentive, right? But at what point in I sign the paperwork to get it and everything's finished, at what point is, am I missing out on that incentive?
The way that it's worded, the system needs to be installed and operational before January 1st of 2026.
There we go.
Also keep in mind, right? Cities, utility companies, especially cities, they love taking holidays. So the next thing you end up bumping into is Thanksgiving break, winter break, etc. So it's the end of July right now. There is no time to delay. Like you got to do it.
No.
So that way,
Now.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's still going to be viable next year too. Solar will be. It's just that 30% of the project won't be coming back to you in the form of a federal incentive, or you'll have to use a third party ownership type of way of going about it. Let some corporation claim that incentive for you to realize it. But if you don't want somebody else to own your system for whatever length of time, if you want that full control, then you might as well tackle it and get while the getting's good.
For sure.
Cool.
Love it.
Well, yeah, click the link in the description. That's going to take you to our American Dream expansion pack page. Goes over our underlying thesis, which will not change. Next year, demand will be greater for electricity than it is right now. We'll be using more in Texas tomorrow than we are today. The supply is not keeping up. And so, in the words of one of my clients, if you're not producing your own electricity, you might not have any. Until next time, I've been Nick with the Solar Scouts,
Lewis with the Solar Scouts.
and we'll see you on the sunny side.